whether it was down to a change of heart regarding the content of the feature, not wanting to work during their time away from set, or actively avoiding having to share a room with a co-star they despised. Each of these following 10 actors decided that they definitely did not want to be involved with the promotional side of things. I'm Gareth from WhatCulture.com, and here are actors who refused to promote their own movies. Edward Norton, the Incredible Hulk. It's been well documented that Edward Norton wasn't exactly the easiest star to work with during the production of The Incredible Hulk. However, while still acting as the fledgling MCU's big green ball of fury, Norton's frustrations with the screenwriters and direction his character had gone down during the flick led to him completely ducking the press tour. The show went on though, as Norton's co-star Liv Tyler and director Louis Leterrier professionally did the rounds while the leading actor reportedly went on vacation. This clearly didn't help Norton's cause when it came to his future in the MCU as a whole, and Mark Ruffalo definitely made for a less problematic and reliable substitute going forward. In the years since his brief Hulk adventure came to an end, Norton has admitted that he really enjoyed working on the project, but he also confessed that the commitment needed to consistently play that role and promote it would have kept him from performing in other genres outside of the superhero world. The MCU life isn't for everyone, folks. Vince Vaughn, 4 Christmases. Not every actor gets along with their co-stars like a house on fire. In fact, some actually grow to absolutely detest the person they're sharing scenes with, or pretending to be romantically involved with on screen. That's exactly what happened when Vince Vaughn and Reese Witherspoon worked together on the forgettable Christmas comedy 4 Christmases. It was widely reported at the time that the pair didn't see eye to eye on set, so it was always going to be interesting to see how the actors reacted to each other during the premiere, and various press interviews scheduled for the film's release. Only we never actually got a chance to see the two in a room together outside of the feature itself, as Vaughn decided to sit out the film's premiere and press tour. Was his absence seriously caused by the other work obligations that were cited at the time, or was Vaughn just trying to get one over on his co-star? Whatever his reasons, the duo haven't worked together since, and it's not hard to see why. Jim Carrey, Kick-Ass 2. Legendary comedy actor Jim Carrey was clearly happy to play the part of Colonel Stars and Stripes in Kick-Ass 2 when he initially signed on the dotted line. But once filming had wrapped on the project, real-life events drastically altered his opinion on the film he just lent his name and face to. A month after the feature had been completed, a tragic shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School occurred, and Carrey simply couldn't condone the extreme violence audiences would be seeing in his upcoming movie in the wake of this awful incident. Posting on Twitter, the Liar star said, "I did Kick-Ass a month before Sandy Hook, and now in all good conscience, I cannot support that level of violence. My apologies to others involved with the film. I'm not ashamed of it, but recent events have caused a change in my heart." Carrey ultimately refused to promote the film in the lead up to its release, but many on the social media site felt this stance was a tad hypocritical, given he was all too happy to keep hold of the dollar he received for appearing in a film he disagreed with so deeply. Paris Hilton, pledge this. If you sign a contract which states that you must fulfill certain obligations in order to receive your sizable paycheck, you better believe there will be trouble if you fail to do what is expected of you. Paris Hilton found this out the hard way when she refused to promote the comedy flop Pledge This. Choosing not to take part in magazine/radio interviews or appear on television shows to sell the flick, Hilton was eventually sued by the film's investors, who were seeking $8.3 million in damages. The expensive lawsuit stated that the actor violated her contract by not showing up for these appearances, and her noticeable absence directly affected the film's overall earnings when it was released on DVD. Hilton insisted that she'd spent 2 years promoting the movie in the lead up to its release, and mentioned that she was never informed her contract required her to make appearances to promote the film after its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, which she also snubbed due to being angry about the addition of various nude scenes. In the end, the lawsuit was finally settled after her attorneys insisted that the star's no-showing of the various interviews and appearances didn't directly affect the investors financially. What a drama. Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz, Dreamhouse. Psychological horror thriller Dreamhouse was quite obviously a project British acting stars Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz wanted to forget about, despite it being the film which brought the pair together romantically. After watching the final edit of the feature, both of the respected actors decided they weren't big fans of what had been thrown together, and refused to promote the film in the lead up to its release. Evidently agreeing with his leading actors' points of view, the film's Oscar-nominated director Jim Sheridan also remarkably opted against appearing at promotional events for the feature, due to not not being happy with Morgan Creek Productions meddling when it came to the script and said final cut. When both of the film's stars and the person steering the ship elected to bury their heads in the sand, you knew something disastrous was on the horizon. Sure enough, Dreamhouse was a critical and commercial flop, scoring a putrid 6% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and earning $40 million on a $50 million budget. Monique, precious. If you work non-stop from Monday to Friday, the chances are you're not going to be overly enthusiastic about coming in on the weekend to work for free, right? This is the point Precious star Monique made when discussing her refusal to promote the film which earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress overseas. After initially being paid $50,000 to appear in the flick, the actor who played Mary Lee Johnston was reportedly asked by director Lee Daniels and the studio to promote the feature at the Cannes Film Festival. However, her contract only covered promotional obligations in the US, which meant she wouldn't be paid anything extra to promote the project anywhere else. In the end, the studio and Cannes themselves insisted they'd never paid an actor to promote a film. So instead of walking the red carpet and answering questions in various interviews at Cannes, Monique ultimately opted to stay home and spend time with her family. Michael Caine, Jaws: The Revenge. If you've never seen the third sequel to Steven Spielberg's game-changing blockbuster, more commonly known as Jaws: The Revenge, we won't blame you for giving this one a miss. In fact, the film's iconic star, Michael Caine, hasn't even endured the 90-minute disaster. Speaking on the Jonathan Ross show, Caine revealed, "Somebody said, 'Have you ever seen Jaws 4?' I said no, but I've seen the house it bought for my mum. It's fantastic." On top of not actually sitting through the flop he starred in, Caine also didn't partake in much press during the lead-up to its disappointing release. He clearly had no interest in promoting a project he could plainly sense was going to be a catastrophic failure of a feature. Yet when summing up his time spent on the picture in his book, What's It All About?, Caine simply said, "The Revenge will go down in my memory as the time when I won an Oscar, paid for a house, and had a great holiday. Not bad for a flop movie." Lindsay Lohan, The Canyons. It probably shouldn't have come as that much of a surprise to director Paul Schrader when the Canyon star Lindsay Lohan snubbed her promotional responsibilities once the film had wrapped. Lohan was reportedly fired by the director after she failed to show up to work one day. However, she was eventually brought back on board to finish the feature. Yet despite her history of no-showing, Schrader still seemed to be shocked when Lohan suddenly decided she didn't want to support the film in person at the Venice Film Festival. Commenting via Facebook post, the Taxi driver and Raging Bull writer confessed, "I am mystified and disappointed by Lindsay Lohan's refusal to support the Canyons. She repeatedly said she would come to Venice but never did. She never showed for the photo sessions, including the session for the ad campaign art." Lohan had recently just completed a stint in rehab and later revealed on her website that she ducked the Venice event to focus on her health and well-being, before adding that she was never confirmed to attend. Though Schrader was understandably upset by her decision, he did still admit that the film was an extraordinary piece of work and serves her well. How nice. Katherine Heigl, Knocked Up. When Judd Apatow's Knocked Up hilariously burst onto the scene all those years ago, one of the movie's stars, Katherine Heigl, became something of a global movie star overnight. However, instead of celebrating the comedy which helped her successfully transition from television to the big screen, the Grey's Anatomy star quickly turned on the project after its release. Heigl branded the feature as a little sexist when talking to Vanity Fair, and revealed, "I had a hard time with it on some days. I'm playing such a bitch. Why is she being such a killjoy?" Heigl also mentioned how it was hard for her to love the movie. Yikes, tell us how you really feel. Apatow and the film's other leading actor Seth Rogen eventually commented on Heigl's opinion on her role and the film by revealing that the star improvised half of her sugar honey iced tea, which led to the pair not understanding why she had such a problem with a character she helped create. It must be said that Heigl has openly admitted her time making Knocked Up was the best filming experience of her career by far, and she has since admitted it was dumb of her to criticize a project she should have been promoting. Thankfully, both of the film stars have since gone on record to say that there are no hard feelings shared between them anymore either. You just love a happy ending, right? Robin Williams, Aladdin. Although Robin Williams' performance as the genie in Disney's animated classic Aladdin has since gone down in history as one of the finest vocal performances ever, there was a time when the star didn't want to be seen promoting the musical fantasy flick quite so much. Around the time of Aladdin's release, Williams also had another feature entering cinemas by the name of Toys, and didn't want to create competition between the two flicks. So he insisted that his voice should not be used in Aladdin's promotional material, and his name be kept away from the film as much as possible. possible in the lead-up to its release. At first, the House of Mouse agreed to the star's demands. However, they soon went back on their word and heavily pushed Williams as the must-see attraction of the film. Toys would ultimately flop once it landed on the big screen, and Aladdin would go on to become a smash hit, earning Williams a Golden Globe for his exceptional work on the feature. Yet the actor was still upset with Disney's decision to completely ignore their agreement, and later refused to return to the role in the direct-to-video follow-up The Return of Jafar, which was probably a wise call all around.
Kevin Spacey 7. Disgraced actor Kevin Spacey became a Hollywood star after winning a Best Actor Academy Award for his performance in The Usual Suspects. The same year, he was cast in David Fincher's thriller Seven as the main villain John Doe. Since he was a big name, the producers intended to give Spacey top billing. Even though the actor only appears in the last 10 minutes, plastering Spacey's name on the posters was guaranteed to help Seven sell a lot more tickets. However, Spacey didn't want anyone to know he was in the movie in order to keep the killer's identity a secret. So, to ensure that no one found out, Spacey's face was not on the poster, his name doesn't appear on the opening credits, and he didn't market Seven in any way. The producers originally balked at the idea of Spacey not promoting the film, believing it could hurt the movie's chances at the box office. Thankfully, it all worked out for the best though. Seven went on to make 10 times its budget and is now hailed as one of Fincher's finest movies, and among the best thrillers ever made. Ed Harris, The Abyss. James Cameron is legendary for his movies' troublesome productions, and The Abyss was no different. Because the main cast was submerged underwater for extended periods of time, it was a nightmare for everyone involved. What's worse is that most of the action scenes revolving around flooding and dodging collapsing debris were performed by the actors, and not stunt workers. As bad as it was for the whole ensemble, no one suffered more than the lead actor Ed Harris. Cameron kept Harris underwater for so long he nearly drowned multiple times. Things got so heated it's been reported that Harris socked the director in the face after filming a particularly grueling scene. Because Cameron ordered Harris not to blink for the underwater scenes, the chlorine constantly burned his eyes. And after driving home one day during production, Harris pulled over the car and started crying out of frustration. Poor Ed. Harris found the entire experience so traumatic he refused to talk about the production for years. In his own words, asking me how I was treated on The Abyss is like asking a soldier how he was treated in Vietnam. Yikes. Exit to Eden, Dan Aykroyd and Rosie O'Donnell. On paper, Exit to Eden sounded like a hit. It was written by the author of Interview with the Vampire, the late Anne Rice. It had the same director as Pretty Woman. It stars Rosie O'Donnell, and Dan Aykroyd were the hottest comedians at the time. How could it fail? But fail it did. Considering the story revolves around a sex island with diamond smugglers and submissive fantasists, Exit to Eden was a bit too weird to work, really, despite the talent behind it. Dan Aykroyd admitted in an interview that this comedy was the movie he regrets making the most. Since he's appeared in quite a few stinkers over the years, that is a pretty bold statement. Now, when an actor is disappointed with how a film turned out, all they really have to do to show their disdain is to avoid promoting it. But Rosie O'Donnell did one better, baby. The comedian did show up at red carpet events for Exit to Eden, but also brought her dog with her. The ferocious mutt barked at any reporters who came near her, making it impossible for her to talk about the movie. Yeah, well played, Rosie. David Hyde Pierce, Hellboy. David Hyde Pierce is among the few actors whose reason for not promoting his work was considered justified. In the 2004 version of Hellboy, expert mime and contortionist Doug Jones portrayed the amphibious humanoid Abe Sapien. Because Jones wasn't famous at the time, the studio wanted a big name to voice the character, and so hired David Hyde Pierce. In situations like this, the person performing the voice is usually credited for the role. For example, Sylvester Stallone was credited as King Shark in the Suicide Squad, even though the character was portrayed by Steve Agee. Because Jones was a stuntman at the time and Pierce was a 4-time Emmy winner, it seemed reasonable that Pierce was credited for Abe Sapien. However, Pierce was so blown away by Jones' performance as the aquatic hybrid, he let him attain sole credit for the role. The Fraser star also didn't attend the premiere since he didn't want to steal Jones' thunder. That is legendary behavior right there. When Pierce refused to return for the sequel, Doug Jones Jones was allowed to use his own voice for the character, helping solidify his career as a true actor. And while we're talking about creature performances in movies, I want to know right now, what's your favourite ever creature performance you've seen in a film? Is it Andy Serkis as Gollum? Is it Doug Jones as Abe Sapien? You let me know in the comments section down below. Marlon Brando, the Freshman. Marlon Brando may be famous for his acting, but he's also infamous for being difficult to work with. Not only did he have a habit for picking fights with everyone on set, he condemned his own movie The Score and refused to pick up his Academy Award for The Godfather. Another movie that Brando proved difficult to work with on was The Freshman. In this comedy, Brando plays Carmine Sabatini, the mob boss that supposedly inspired The Godfather's Vito Corleone. At first, everything on the production seemed to be going swimmingly. According to the director, Andrew Bergman, the legendary actor was very professional and an absolute pleasure to work with. However, all that changed when production neared its end. When filming was extended by a week, Brando demanded an additional $1 million. And after he was refused, Brando began condemning The Freshman before it had a chance to hit theaters. Because the producers couldn't have one of the lead stars telling the world that his movie was gonna tank, that is not a good look, they paid him his unreasonable fee. And after that, he changed his tune and started praising the movie. We got there in the end. If you're enjoying this What Culture video today, my friend, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these wonderful videos. It just makes sense to me. Cameron Diaz, the Counsellor. The Counsellor revolves around a lawyer whose life turns upside down after he gets involved with drug traffickers. With Ridley Scott at the helm and a stellar ensemble that included Brad Pitt, Javier Bardem, Cameron Diaz, Penelope Cruz, and Michael Fassbender, The Counsellor appeared like it had all the makings of a classic. Just look at all those stars. But in reality, The Counsellor is Ridley Scott's worst film. Even though there are many elements that don't work, the one that viewers fixate on is the scene where Cameron Diaz's character has sex with a car. Yep, you heard me. When the Oscar-winning actress made it clear she wanted nothing to do with the movie, many assumed her decision was because of this scene. But Diaz's boycott was for a more obscure reason. Originally, Diaz played her character with a Bajan accent, which test audiences, they hated. When she was forced to redub her lines in her regular voice, Diaz was so ticked off she refused to do any interviews for The Counsellor. It's hard to say what's stranger, really. The fact that Diaz had no problem humping a windscreen, or the fact she thought redubbing her dialogue was an issue. Very weird. Shia LaBeouf, various. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a huge disappointment. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen was a dud. Even though the actors attached to those projects knew this fact, it is still their job to sell the movies. Unfortunately, Shia LaBeouf did the exact opposite. While discussing the Indiana Jones 4th installment, he said, "I feel like I dropped the ball on the legacy that people loved and cherished." Worse still, he threw Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg under the bus, saying they also thought Kingdom of the Crystal Skull sucked. The actor didn't seem to learn his lesson since he also badmouthed the second Transformers, publicly admitting it was let down by a bad script. You just don't do that. And even though LaBeouf was desperate to work on Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac, he made no effort to promote that movie. During a press conference, he refused to answer any questions. When he was asked a direct question, he ignored it and instead said, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it is because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much," before then leaving. Eric Cantona fans out there will recognize that one. But yeah, weird guy. Christopher Plummer, The Sound of Music. It's kind of ironic how the only person who seemed to hate The Sound of Music was its lead star, Christopher Plummer. Because Plummer had a deep dislike for schmaltz and working with children, The Sound of Music is probably the worst film he could have worked on. He said that being around Julie Andrews felt like he was being hit over the head with a big Valentine's Day card every day. And he got so sick and tired of listening to the same music over and over, Plummer regularly got drunk. His constant drinking caused him to put on a lot of weight too, forcing his costume designer to refit his outfits. It goes without saying that Plummer wanted nothing to do with the movie the second production wrapped, but after The Sound of Music became one of the most celebrated movies of all time, you'd assume he acknowledged that he may have been too harsh. But that was not the case. In hindsight, Plummer's hatred for the film never subsided. He resented the fact that his performance forced him to be typecast in similar roles for years to come. Burt Reynolds, Boogie Nights. With Burt Reynolds' career-defining performances in Deliverance and Smokey and the Bandit, it was easy to see why he was one of the biggest stars during the 1970s. But as he got older, Reynolds' career went into decline. However, everything changed when he starred in the 1997 drama Boogie Nights. His captivating portrayal as porn director Jack Horner revitalized his career and earned him a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination. But there was one person very unhappy with Burt Reynolds, and that was, well, Burt Reynolds. After seeing a rough cut, Reynolds told director Paul Thomas Anderson he hated everything about it. Even though Boogie Nights was universally acclaimed and helped launch the career of most of the cast, Reynolds wanted nothing to do with it. Not only did he fire his agent for recommending the film to him, he refused to participate in any promotions. Why Reynolds was pissed off about this masterpiece but was totally okay with starring in the god-awful striptease the following year is anybody's guess. Because Burt was considered a dead ringer for an Oscar, many people believe his negativity towards Boogie Nights cost him the award. Christopher Lee, The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. There was nobody on the production of The Lord of the Rings who loved J.R.R. Tolkien's novel more than Christopher Lee. Considering he taught himself Elvish and read the book annually, it's honestly hard to find anyone on the planet who adored The Lord of the Rings more. So when the London-born performer was cast in the film adaptation as Saruman the White, you'd think it was a dream come true. However, things took a dark turn while filming part of the final chapter of the trilogy, Return of the King. Even though Lee shot a scene where the Fellowship confront and kill the White Wizard, it was left on the cutting room floor. In Lee's words after watching Return of the King in private, "I couldn't believe what I saw, I wasn't in it." Sir Christopher was so hurt he didn't show up at the film's premiere. Although actors who don't promote their work are often accused of being immature and unprofessional, pretty much everyone supported Lee's boycott. Considering he was the biggest physical threat in the story, it was nonsensical for him not to make an appearance in the trilogy's closing movie. At least he was brought back for the extended editions though, eh?